The topic of a black Jesus has long stirred emotions, both inspiring and troubling. For centuries, Jesus Christ has predominantly been depicted in Western iconography as a fair-skinned, blue-eyed figure. This image of Jesus, however, diverges starkly from the likely appearance of a man from first-century Judea, and even more so from the portrayals of Jesus in many African and African diaspora communities, where he is often envisioned with darker skin and African features. This reimagining or reclaiming of Jesus as black or African in appearance has raised questions about identity, power, and truth within Christian teachings. For some, the notion of a black Jesus represents a reclaiming of sacred narratives, a symbol of solidarity with the oppressed, and a profound assertion of dignity. For others, however, this concept is met with resistance or even fear, a fear deeply rooted in the historical, cultural, and theological power structures of the Church. The image of a black Jesus, though unsettling for some, invites an exploration into the racial and colonial legacies embedded within Christianity. The Church's visual representation of Christ, which has shaped the minds and hearts of millions over centuries, has been predominantly Western and Eurocentric. The influence of this image permeates various dimensions of society, affecting not only religious practices, but also cultural and psychological understandings of divinity and humanity. Depicting Jesus as white has often implied, intentionally or otherwise, that God himself carries a Eurocentric form. This portrayal, absorbed by societies around the world, has contributed to a theological and ideological framework where Eurocentric images are linked with divinity, authority, and purity, while African and other non-European images are often sidelined. Historically, the image of a black Jesus is not as radical as it may initially seem. Early depictions of Christ in the Eastern Orthodox Church, in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, and in some of the earliest Christian communities in Africa and the Middle East did not depict Jesus as European. These early images often showed Christ with darker skin tones and physical features more representative of the regions in which he lived and ministered. The dominance of a white Jesus in global Christianity, therefore, was not an inevitability, but rather a product of later socio-political developments, particularly as Christianity spread throughout Europe and as European empires expanded. During the era of European colonization, the imposition of a white Jesus was used as a tool for cultural dominance, where European colonizers often used Christian iconography to assert their authority over colonized peoples, reinforcing an image of white superiority and divine favor. This issue reaches further into the psychological and cultural fabric of Christianity. Many black theologians and scholars argue that the image of a white Jesus contributes to a form of cultural dissonance and alienation for black believers. If Jesus is seen as a white man, then the divine representation within the faith appears foreign, almost disconnected from the identities of millions of people who do not share this image. The portrayal of a black Jesus, or an image of Jesus that aligns more closely with African aesthetics, becomes a theological affirmation, suggesting that black people are not only participants in the Christian story but are intimately part of it. This is a message of inclusivity and belonging, where the divine is seen as embracing diverse identities and backgrounds. From a socio-political perspective, the image of a black Jesus serves as a powerful critique of racism and an affirmation of black identity and resistance. Throughout history, black communities across the world have faced systemic discrimination and marginalization, both within society and, at times, within the church itself. The image of a black Jesus thus stands as a counter-narrative, suggesting that the oppressed are not only worthy but that they hold a significant place within the story of salvation. This vision of Jesus as a figure who understands suffering and oppression on a personal level is a compelling message of hope and resilience. Yet, it also poses a challenge to the status quo, especially within religious institutions that have historically supported, or at least failed to adequately challenge racial hierarchies. The image of a black Jesus asks the church to reconsider its complicity in the marginalization of black people and to confront its own historical biases. The resistance within some parts of the church to embrace or even consider a black Jesus can be understood as part of a larger struggle over religious symbolism and authority. Religious iconography is not merely aesthetic. It conveys beliefs, reinforces social norms, and establishes cultural values. The centuries-old image of a white Jesus has become a symbol of Western Christianity and, by extension, Western cultural influence. Introducing a black Jesus would call into question the long-standing narrative and hierarchy within the faith, challenging some believers' deeply ingrained perceptions. This potential disruption is uncomfortable for those who see religious iconography as a bedrock of their faith tradition. For these believers, the idea of Jesus as a black man may feel foreign, even if it is historically and theologically plausible. Additionally, the shift in representation challenges the broader cultural implications of Christianity in a racially diverse world. It opens conversations around inclusivity, representation, and the Church's responsibility to reflect the diversity of its global community. Some within the Church worry that embracing such diverse depictions may lead to divisions or dilute established doctrines. However, supporters argue that recognizing Jesus through different cultural lenses enriches the faith and makes it more accessible to believers from various backgrounds. A black Jesus is not merely a symbol of race, but a testament to Christianity's claim of universality, a faith meant to embrace and reflect all people. For those who hold this view, a black Jesus is not an erasure of tradition, but a call to return to the inclusive, boundary-breaking nature of Jesus' message. The theological implications of a black Jesus also have profound spiritual significance. In many Christian traditions, Jesus is not just a figure of worship, but also an example of humility and compassion for the marginalized. Jesus' identification with the oppressed and the least of these is a central theme in the Gospels. A black Jesus, who aligns with those historically and currently marginalized, brings new depth to this concept of solidarity and challenges the Church to live up to its call for justice and equality. For some, this message threatens existing power structures within the Church, particularly where these structures have been complicit in sustaining racial inequalities. Ultimately, the image of a black Jesus terrifies some within the Church because it requires an honest confrontation with Christianity's own history of racial bias and its impact on believers worldwide. It asks questions that are uncomfortable but necessary. Can Christianity truly be a universal faith if its most central figure is portrayed in only one racial or ethnic image? Does the Church risk alienating believers of diverse backgrounds by maintaining an exclusively white iconography? And can the Church live up to its call for justice and reconciliation if it avoids acknowledging these biases? The image of a black Jesus serves as both a mirror and a challenge. It mirrors the diversity of the global Christian community and challenges the Church to embody this inclusivity in all aspects of its teachings and practices. Acknowledging a black Jesus would not erase centuries of tradition, but rather add to the richness of Christian iconography, representing a faith that is both rooted in history and responsive to the needs of all its followers. In facing this image without fear, the Church can embrace a more profound truth, a truth that honors the humanity of all and the God who became one of us, beyond the boundaries of race or color. This is why the image of a black Jesus remains powerful, unsettling, and for some, terrifying. It is a call to reimagine what the Church can be and to reclaim a faith that truly speaks to all humanity, embracing every culture and every individual within its fold.